The courtroom smelled of old wood and old prejudice. It was thick in the air, heavier than the law books stacked behind the bench and more permanent than the scuffed marble floors beneath worn shoes. Judge Raymond Carter, a relic in both age and ideology, leaned back in his high-backed leather chair like it was a throne. His silver-rimmed glasses sat low on his nose, his cold gray eyes peering over them as if every person standing before him was a criminal, especially the black ones. He had ruled this courtroom for 26 years, not just the cases, but the people. Prosecutors knew how to play to his ego, defense attorneys knew when to back down, and everyone else knew to keep quiet. He handed down sentences like punishments from a vengeful God, and if you were black, you'd better pray you walked out alive. On a humid Monday morning in May, the temperature was already climbing by the time the clerk called State versus Jerome Beckett. A tall black man in a frayed green hoodie stood as the cuffs around his wrists rattled. His crime? Allegedly stealing tools from a construction site where he used to work. There was no video footage, no fingerprints, just a white foreman's word, and that was always enough for Judge Carter. The public defender muttered a plea deal into Jerome's ear. Jerome turned, looked at the gallery, and locked eyes with the only person who hadn't blinked in the courtroom that morning, Amara Daniels. She sat poised, back straight, notepad in hand, her expression unreadable. She wasn't Jerome's lawyer. Not yet. She was just watching, for now. Judge Carter scowled. "Let me guess," he said, staring at Jerome. "Another misunderstanding, another excuse, another waste of taxpayer money." His voice was condescending, venomous, and theatrically loud. The sentence was 5 years, for missing tools and a former employer's suspicion. Amara wrote something on her pad. By the end of that week, 4 more black men had been sentenced under Carter's gavel, all with similar stories. No hard evidence, no mercy, all gone. But Judge Carter didn't notice the young black woman who showed up every day, always in the same seat, always writing, never speaking. Until she stood up. It was Friday afternoon, right before lunch, and Carter was reaching for his gavel when a new voice interrupted. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Heads turned. Silence swept the courtroom. Judge Carter squinted. "Who are you?" "Amara Daniels, attorney of record for Mr. Jerome Beckett. I filed a substitution of counsel motion with the clerk this morning. It's already on your desk." He looked down, and there it was, a fresh file, stamped and approved. "Fine," he said, annoyed. "You've got 10 minutes to waste my time." 10 minutes turned into 30, then 60. Amara didn't just argue, she dissected. She brought Jerome's pay stubs, his GPS records, the fact that his former employer had recently been cited for racial discrimination. She quoted past rulings, some from Carter himself. She moved with a calm precision that unsettled the room. And then she did the one thing no one dared. She challenged his pattern. "Your Honor," she said, her voice level but firm, "I have sentenced 27 black defendants this quarter. Each received maximum or near maximum sentences. Of the 24 white defendants tried in the same time period, only 2 received similar outcomes. I'm submitting a formal motion to recuse." It was a bombshell. Carter's face flushed. "Are you accusing this court of racism, Miss Daniels?" "I'm submitting evidence, Your Honor. The accusation will come later." The courtroom exploded into murmurs. Carter slammed his gavel. "Silence!" But the silence didn't obey him the same way it used to. Something had shifted. Amara wasn't just a good lawyer, she was tactical. Over the weekend, her motion and supporting documents were leaked to a local journalist, then a state-level watchdog, then a civil rights group.
By Monday morning, Carter's inbox was flooded, but he was too proud to back down. That week, Amara filed 3 more motions, each representing a black defendant Carter had ruled against. She backed every claim with facts, patterns, judicial behavior logs, court transcripts, sentencing records, everything. But no one knew who she really was. Not yet. That changed when a reporter caught her outside the courthouse. "Ms. Daniels, some are calling you the new face of racial justice in this city. How do you respond?" Amara offered a tight smile. "I'm just doing my job." The next question hit harder. "Are you related to Chief Justice Miriam Daniels?" Her smile didn't waver. "That's my aunt." And just like that, the war Judge Carter thought he was winning turned into a siege he didn't see coming. Because Amara wasn't just a lawyer, she was legacy. Her father had been a public defender in the 90s, her mother a community organizer, her aunt the highest-ranking judge in the state. And the two of them had been watching Carter for years. Amara had been building this case long before Jerome Beckett. He was just the final trigger, the proof she needed. Judge Carter was furious. He ordered sanctions, he tried to dismiss the motions, he threatened Amara with contempt. But she never flinched. In fact, she smiled. And then she filed something that had never been filed in that courtroom before. A formal complaint for judicial misconduct and racial bias backed with the full weight of the state bar, 3 law schools, and the Chief Justice herself. Judge Carter's name was now under investigation. That Friday, Amara walked into court again, this time representing a young woman who had been given a 6-year sentence for defending herself in a domestic abuse case. The victim was white. The defendant was black. The evidence was flimsy, but Carter had thrown the book at her. Amara reopened the case, presented new evidence, presented new witnesses, and then she presented something else, a 200-page dossier of Carter's past rulings in domestic violence cases, highlighting the massive disparity based on race. It wasn't just compelling, it was damning. Carter's hands trembled, his voice cracked. For the first time in decades, he didn't seem like a judge. He seemed like a man who knew the walls were closing in. He recessed the case, said he needed time to review. But Amara knew it wasn't about the case. It was about him. She had forced him to look in the mirror, and he didn't like what he saw. Later that evening, he sat alone in his chambers, staring at the photos on his wall. A younger him, shaking hands with governors, smiling in graduation robes, laughing with old colleagues. But it all felt like a lie now. Or maybe it always had been. The intercom buzzed. "Judge Carter, you have a call from Chief Justice Daniels." He didn't answer. He just sat there, breathing heavy. The call wasn't a courtesy. It was a reckoning. And Amara Daniels had lit the match.
She hadn't forgotten. But today wasn't about revenge. Today was about record. She stood, calm as ever, and addressed the panel. Over the last decade, Judge Carter has demonstrated a consistent pattern of judicial bias, disproportionate sentencing, and dismissive conduct toward black attorneys and defendants. This isn't a claim, it's a pattern, documented across 416 cases, 63 appeals, and nearly 24 formal complaints previously ignored or buried. Today, you will hear from witnesses, view evidence, and listen to the stories that for too long were silenced under the weight of a gavel. Judge Carter flinched, not visibly, but his fingers curled. The testimonies began. One by one, people took the stand. A young black man, convicted at 17 for joyriding in a stolen car, sentenced to 9 years. The white co-defendant, probation. a mother of 3 who served 6 months for shoplifting baby formula, a defense attorney who was interrupted 38 times during trial. She was black. Her white colleague in the next case interrupted once. Case after case, statistic after statistic. It wasn't just prejudice, it was practice. Carter's lawyer objected. "These are emotional appeals," he insisted, "not legal findings." Amara didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "They're both, and they're backed by your client's own rulings." Then she handed the panel a sealed envelope. Inside, a transcript from a private conversation recorded during a judicial dinner 2 years prior. Judge Carter, unaware he was near a hot mic, had said, "I don't trust those kids raised in the hood to speak the truth even if you showed them a Bible. They're taught to lie before they learn to read." His voice, on tape. Silence in the room was immediate, cold, heavy. The panel looked at each other, then back at Carter. But Amara wasn't done. She stepped forward once more. "What's worse than racism is racism with power, because it doesn't just stain hearts, it writes policy, it ruins lives, it hands out punishments, not justice." Then she paused. Let it breathe. And power is exactly what this judge wielded, unchecked and unrepentant for over 2 decades. The hearing was adjourned. A decision would come in 30 days. But it didn't take that long. 17 days later, Judge Raymond Carter was formally suspended pending a full investigation. His docket was frozen, his name removed from the courthouse schedule. It was the first time in state history a sitting judge had been benched mid-term for racial misconduct. But for Amara, it wasn't a victory yet. Not until the lives ruined were repaired. She filed motions to reopen 31 cases. In 6 months, 11 convictions were overturned. 3 men walked free. 2 women got their children back. A young man was re-enrolled in college with a full scholarship, thanks to Amara's legal aid fund, now backed by civil rights organizations nationwide. And then came the letter. An official summons. The State Judicial Commission requests Amara Daniels speak as a featured guest at the annual Judicial Review Summit.
She walked on stage in a deep emerald suit, the room filled with judges and lawmakers, their pens poised and their faces tight with curiosity and discomfort. Not everyone welcomed her, but no one could deny her. "My father was arrested when I was 5, she began. Not because he broke the law, but because someone with power decided his skin was threat enough." She glanced down at the front row. Her aunt, Chief Justice Miriam Daniels, offered a quiet nod. "I didn't become a lawyer to fight the system," Amara continued. "I became one to remind it of its promises." And then, for the first time in months, she allowed herself to speak about Carter, not as a judge, but as a symbol. Prejudice wrapped in professionalism is still prejudice. Wearing a robe doesn't absolve anyone from accountability. We are not asking the law to be perfect. We are demanding it be fair. If you cannot offer justice to all, you don't deserve the authority to give it to any. Applause didn't come immediately, but when it did, it was thunderous. Later that evening, Amara stood alone outside the courthouse, the wind brushing against her face. The same courthouse where so many lives had been shattered, and now, slowly, reshaped. A man approached her. He was older, scarred, face hardened by years in and out of prison. "You don't remember me, but I was in the back row every day during your hearings. I did 10 years because of that man. I thought I'd never breathe air without chains again. But you
You made the system flinch." Amara looked him in the eyes. "I didn't do it alone." "No," he agreed, tears glassing over his eyes. "But you were the first to throw the stone and say enough." As the sun dipped low behind the courthouse dome, Amara stared up at its stone columns, once cold, now cracking. Change was slow, but it had begun. Judge Carter would never return to the bench. The investigation revealed far more than expected: discriminatory hiring practices, deleted case notes, backdoor meetings with prosecutors. He would retire in shame. But Amara Daniels? She was just getting started. And the next judge who thought his robe made him untouchable? She'd be there too, with facts, with fire, with legacy. Because justice wasn't a favor, it was a promise, and Amara Daniels had come to collect.